Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to go over the three most important, in my opinion, non-programming skills that will make you a really good developer, even if your programming skills are still being developed, no pun intended, and you are still working towards learning how to program. It sounds pretty weird, but these three skills, especially the third one, which in my opinion is the most important, so make sure you stick around for that, are going to make it so that as you're learning, you get shaped into a well-rounded engineer and developer, and it's not going to leave too many gaps, and it's probably going to really expedite the rate at which you learn how to code as well. So if you like this video or have any comments or any suggestions on what I can do in the future, leave them in the comments below. Helps a lot with the algorithm, and make sure you hit that thumbs up button. So the three skills I'm talking about here are as follows. Uncomfortable unknowingness, self-sufficiency, and operationalization, which, like I said, I think is the most important one. First, let's start with comfortable unknowingness. All this means is being comfortable with not knowing how things work. A lot of the times, people that first get engaged in programming believe it's one of those things where you go to school or a boot camp or you learn online, you learn everything you need to know to cover all the base use cases, then you get a job and you should know how everything works. And it's the complete opposite. At least in my experience, 99% of the time, you will never know how everything works, and you will never be fully prepared for any job or any project that you are making. The idea here is that it's not one of those things where you learn everything before the job and then you get the job knowing everything. It's one of those skills where you never stop learning on the job. There are always going to be things that you are learning. And part of this is because when you work at a company, a lot of the times, a lot of what they have built is going to be custom towards their organizations. They might not be following best practices. They might not, they might have very specific use cases and very specific things they have to do that they have to make non-standard code for. There's never going to be a situation that you will fully be prepared for when you accept a job. And the majority of jobs I have ever accepted have always been jobs that I have had to learn a bunch at the beginning or really, get up to speed with what they are doing before I could start contributing properly. Even especially as a senior engineer, you're probably going to be onboarding onto a project, that is very, already sort of built, and you have to sort of learn how other people's code work. You will never, and this is a big flaw that I see a lot of people do, which is they will always wait until they feel like they're good enough to try and apply to jobs and stuff like that. But there will never be a point where you'll get good enough to the point where you can accept any job and just automatically know everything and just hit the ground running. You will always have to learn things, whether it's new technologies, whether it's nuances in people's codes, or even if you're starting the code base yourself, there's depending on the different use cases, you might have to learn different technologies and different methods of using the technologies you're familiar with in order to accomplish a goal. And that's just part of being a programmer. You will never know everything. And if you're not someone that is okay with constantly learning on the job and stuff like that, and constantly having to do research and learning how things work, then you might want to take a different perspective of that, or, maybe programming isn't the right place for you. It's not one of those jobs where you can just, or careers where you can just, learn a bunch and then just coast for the next 5 to 10 years off of what you have learned. Even senior developers, architects and stuff like that are still learning as they go. And that ties really well into the second one. The second one is going to be self-sufficiency. And the idea of self-sufficiency is the ability to not make yourself a giant bottleneck when you are trying to learn. A lot of times, if I help guide people through the sort of high-level understanding of how to get started with programming, something like, I think you should learn JavaScript, and then I think you should, learn maybe React after that, and CSS and HTML. A lot of the times, while they might be learning one of those initial technologies, they'll come across a really basic, coding question they can't get rid of, they don't know how to get past, and their first response will be to ask me, or to go and in a Discord chat and ask a bunch of people, or if you're doing a boot camp and stuff like that, you might want to ask the instructors of the boot camp or your professors or anyone. And that is a really bad skill to lean on, because a lot of the times, especially if you're just starting out and you're learning something popular as JavaScript or React or anything like that, if you're facing an issue, probably hundreds of thousands of people before you have faced the same thing as well, and there's a good chance that at least a handful of them have asked that question online and gotten an answer to it. So the idea of being able to research and being able to, when you get stuck or when you're unsure about how to do something, know how to actually Google to get the answer to is a huge part. In fact, in my opinion, it's one of the biggest things that makes a successful programmer. Two programmers could be at the exact same skill level, but if one of them has way better Google foo or research abilities than the other one does, and the other one just relies on asking people for help, in 2 months' time, if they both develop consistently, I can confidently say the person that is way better at Googling will be almost double the skill level as the person that is not. You actually have to really get good at learning how to Google specific things. For example, I remember one of my friends when he was trying to learn how to, code React and stuff like that. One of the things that he Googled when he got into a undefined error was like React like undefined error white screen, and there's a ton of different errors that could possibly cause this. And even if you look at all the Stack Overflow answers, some of them have to do with React Native, some of them have to do with really random stuff like Internet Explorer 11. You're not going to get good answers for it. So a good rule of thumb is if you get an error, try to paste out the most explicit things in it. So for example, cannot map undefined, and then the technology you're using, and I guarantee you're going to get way better Stack Overflow answers that are all going to be specific to what you are looking for. And then also going through Stack Overflow and being able to sort through the answers, because believe me, even if an answer is verified and it has the most upvotes, by no means does it mean it's the best answer. A lot of the times when people ask these questions, they're going to ask them with really specific use cases in mind. And the answer is going to have code with their use cases embedded in it as the solution, instead of the underlying idea of why their code failed in the first place. So knowing how to skim through Stack Overflow answers and knowing how to pick out what you are looking as well can really expedite your learning process and get you through those barriers. Remember, coding's sort of like a race with a bunch of hurdles in it when you're trying to do something. And someone who is more effective at getting over hurdles and someone who can mentally, stand hitting a lot of hurdles in the first place is going to be far more successful than someone who either gives up on their first hurdle or has no idea how to go about overcoming those hurdles. And then that leads us to our third skill. Now, this one is sort of unrelated to the last two, but in my opinion, this is what, in my opinion, creates great, efficient, fast programmers versus programmers that sort of plateau and never get past sort of the skill hump that they're at. And that is the idea of operationalization. Operationalization is the idea of turning abstract concepts into measurable goals and observations. So a lot of the times, especially when you start learning how to program, there aren't too many things in life that sort of teaches this skill. We go to school and school tells us exactly what we need to do. If you play video games, a lot of the times the video games will give you clear objectives and they will walk you through how to attain those objectives. There are not a lot of things in life, apart from programming, in my opinion, that trains you well on this skill of operationalization. And a lot of the times I see people who just start learning how to code, they will, start doing a personal project. And the personal project might be like an overarching idea, like I want to build a weather app or a to-do app or something that calls an API in React. And the problem they run into is they have no idea how to break that down into small actionable pieces. It becomes something that you can be easily overwhelmed by because a lot of the times you might struggle with actually breaking that skill down. And that's one of the hardest things to do and get used to, in my opinion. But once you start doing it, it's also very beneficial outside of programming as well, just in life in general, if you find yourself getting overwhelmed by giant, goals that you have set for yourself and things that you're trying to do. But the art of operationalization, I don't think you could be a really good programmer or a very efficient or effective programmer without the skill of being able to break things down into tiny pieces and do them one by one. You would, especially if you are trying to lead a team or if you're trying to work on something that has a lot of moving parts, you might get overwhelmed way too easily. And it's one thing that I would highly recommend practicing. If if you wanted to practice this and you have a decent understanding of programming as well, you could try thinking of an idea. Like, I want to make an app that can do this. And just, go into Paint, go into Word, go into Google Docs or something, or Notepad, and just try breaking it down into all the moving pieces that you would have to individually code in order to do it. That's a good way to practice it. And then try implementing those pieces. If you are trying to do a personal project, or if you just got your first job and you want to do it, try looking at the overarching goal and breaking it down into multiple different parts and getting used to subconsciously being able to do that process, because it will make your life as a programmer so much less stressful and you will be so much faster faster and more effective, because when you get a task, you won't sit there thinking, how the hell do I do this? You'll break it down to small actionable pieces and you'll start taking action as soon as possible. And in my opinion, operationalization is the most invaluable resource right in front of self-sufficiency that you could possibly have as a programmer. And if you find value and if you learned something from this video, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe, leave a comment. It helps so much with the algorithm, and I'll see you guys in the next video.